Hi everyone, welcome to Geek Out of June 2018. I can't believe it's halfway through the year already. So I'm Phoebe Go. I'm from NetApp in our Sydney office. I'm joined today by Mr. David Adams, who is a solutions engineer at NetApp. So maybe, Dave, do you want to say hi to everybody and a little bit about what you do and, yeah.
Sure.
What your favourite food is.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, I'm Dave Adams. I'm a solutions engineer here at NetApp. I work in the public sector space in New South Wales State Government, but have been through many areas of NetApp throughout my time here. So yeah, happy to be here today and as a guest on Geek Out. Thanks, Phoebe, for having me.
Dave and I have worked together for many. Dave interviewed me actually when I joined NetApp, so that's how long he's been around. So today we are talking about FabricPool, which is a very, very, very interesting technology that is part of our ONTAP data management operating system. Actually, before we get started, I just want to do all the admin bits and pieces. So firstly, chat is open. If you have any questions at any point, drop them into the chat. I may stop at different points just because we have a lot to get through today and answer a bunch of questions. And yeah, if you've got anything else at the end of the session, you can always reach out to myself and we can pass those questions on to people like Dave, smart people like Dave. And we do have a demo as well, which I want to get to as soon as possible. So we're going to go through what is FabricPool. We're going to go through a little bit about why you'd use it and the different ways you can use it. And then, yeah, we'll jump straight into a really, really cool demo.
Yeah, sure.
So, Dave, what is FabricPool and why should I care?
Yeah, sure, Pete. Well, you should care. I mean, the cost of storing data in your data center is not cheap, right? And particularly when we're talking about flash technologies. So customers are looking to do more with the flash technology they have. They're also looking at ways to be able to have their data in the right place at the right time, right? They want their hot data on the fast stuff. They want their data that's been around for quite some time, data that's really low touch or no touch. They want to move that off to a place where it's more cost effective.
And this is kind of that evolution of flash in the data center, right? Where flash is really ubiquitous now everywhere, and you want to make the most use of that really high performance technology.
Absolutely, and you get all the advantages that come with flash, right? You get lower footprint, you get better savings in terms of data center consumption, power and cooling and the likes. So you can still realize that by having those hot data, those hot workloads living on flash. But FabricPool gives us the option to move those cooler workloads off to a place where, yeah, much more cost effective. Okay,
and so with FabricPool, what is, I guess in your mind, some of the best benefits of FabricPool as a tiering technology as opposed to, you know, doing vol moves or other ways of tiering?
Yeah, well, the simplicity is really key, right? FabricPool it's low to no touch. Those workloads that are tiered off, it's done automatically by ONTAP. ONTAP knows a heat map of your data. It knows what data is hot, it knows what data is cold, and it can move that off for you. The beauty of FabricPool is it's invisible to your applications, right? If you think of a traditional archiving type technology built into your particular application, or you're using a third-party application to archive data off, you know, maybe it leaves stub files behind and so on, those workloads are really having to use that, you know, an application at the cost of an application, or having to deploy that into your data center. So, right, in this case, FabricPool doesn't need any of that. It's just invisible to the application. It doesn't matter if your application is old or new. It can make use of FabricPool.
Cool. And you can use FabricPool with different cloud backends, I guess, is another really neat feature, right? So I know that StorageGrid is a target and AWS S3, and in 9.4 we could also support Azure Blob storage? Yeah,
that's it. They've just added Azure Blob as well to FabricPool in 9.4. So yeah, for certain. Look, as we move on, NetApp will expand this out to as many clouds that make sense for our customers.
Yeah, that's cool. There's all that choice, right? Choice and simplicity. In funny dichotomy there. Okay, so what are the different ways that you can tier the data? I mean, it's not just hot or cold. There's actually, you know, different policies.
Yeah, absolutely, Phoebe. So just looking at the tiering policies, so FabricPool's about, it's been around for a while, right? We've had it for over a year now. It came out in ONTAP 9.2. So with 9.2, we released snapshot only or backup. So snapshot only made sense because if you look at typical customers' snapshot consumption, it's around 10 to 15%, right? So that's a bit of a no-brainer. Let's get those snapshots off of our flash storage and onto the cloud, right, or onto an object store where that's more cost-effective. Backup was really a data protection use case where I was able to say, well, okay, I've got my replication destination, whether it be for SnapMirror or for SnapVault, so for long-term backup. I can take that out of my flash data center and move it into a cloud or into an object store. But a new one as part of 9.4, a lot of customers ask us, well, that's really good. We like the idea of moving snapshots off. We like the idea of moving our data protection destinations off to object store. But what about our active file systems? What about our real world everyday data that, you know, that is sitting there and consuming flash when, you know, it's really unstructured and not necessarily needing it, right? And that's where autos come in. And auto is new in 9.4, right? So that this active file system tiering, you know, is a brand new feature that we've released after kind of looking at what the ONTAP team have looked at what people are doing, what they want as well, and it's a new feature that they've just added. Definitely. And well, we were able to test the waters for a year now, right, with those other technologies. So prove that it works. Make sure our customers are testing it, but, you know, it was absolutely kind of resounding that our customers are saying, well, we really want to do our active file systems. Yeah, well, that's really cool. And I guess just talking about 9.4 as well and active file systems, obviously people care about what their performance is like when they are tiering it out to another, to a cloud or to an object store somewhere in their data center. There's some other new features that we've added to ONTAP to help with the performance profiling and to actually see what that data might be before you actually just turn it on, right? Yeah, definitely. Look, there's some new features, and we'll show those as part of the demo today, right? We can have a look at our inactive data, what data aren't we, is not being touched. So we can kind of work this out before we do it, right? We can have a look at the data. Is there a cost benefit to us doing that? And we can kind of model that. The profile helps us understand the performance of the object store on the back end as well. So we know what kind of latency we'll get. Yeah, cool. So do you want to go through these tiering policies just a little bit individually? Because I feel like they have very different use cases, right? There's a need sometimes to have you know, active file system tiering, and then sometimes there is a need to have the backup, but it's not actually it's a different use case. Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? It depends on what your use case is. So this is kind of going back to what we introduced with 9.2, right? And if we look at FabricPool with primary data, the first thing we supported was snapshots. And I just mentioned earlier is that, you know, that was kind of 10 to 15% of people's data on it as an average, right? You could have more snapshot consumption, you could have less. But it's really data that you're not touching unless you have a requirement to restore from that snapshot. So the beauty of that is let's get that off flash. Let's put that onto an object store, a more cost-effective object store, and that's what we did. Now with increasing the number of snapshots NetApp supports, we've got 1,023. So, you know, previously we had 256 snapshots per volume. That's now, you know, 4 times what it once was, right? So yeah, that's snapshot only. If we look at where we went from there, is we said, okay, well, another use case is secondary data. So in our secondary data center, we could have a NetApp all-flash system, which is the target for those long-term backup repositories or for a SnapMirror destination, right? And then instead of having that on a kind of not one-to-one, I mean, you need as much storage as your primary plus the deltas plus whatever rate of change you're storing. Your backup was bigger than your primary, right? That's right, like 1.5 times to 2 times or more, right? Depending on how long you're keeping those backups for. And in a lot of the use cases, those backups were really there for compliance reasons. You weren't often having to go back to those to pull the data back. So again, a really good use case for moving that off from flash off to object, right? And so something I hear, actually, it's the very first time I heard about this at NetApp Insight a couple of years ago when we first released FabricPool, was a guy sitting next to me. He said, "But I don't want to put flash in my secondary." So what if there are customers who have, you know, a FAS system in their secondary?
can they still use FabricPool?
Yeah, good question, Phoebe. Absolutely, right. They can do that by adding an all-flash aggregate. We'll also support this on FAS systems with an all-flash aggregate. The reason we need all-flash, a common question is why can't we just do that with hard drives? And the reason why is you really need the performance of flash to be able to concatenate those blocks into an object and send that off to an object store. So we still need the performance of flash to do that work. But we can do it with your FAS just with an all-flash aggregate. And
I mean, this is just a question in your own experience, Dave, because you are creating some of these solutions and working with customers. Are you seeing a lot of customers putting flash everywhere?
Absolutely, and it's really and it's not just around the data center benefits, not the performance benefits as well, right? It's around the data center. Yeah. We were able to take, an example I just did recently, I was able to take 22 SAS shelves, the old, 24 drive SAS shelves, and 22 down to one shelf, right? Yeah. We've seen other examples of, 4 racks down to half or less than half a rack. Yeah. So as real estate gets more expensive, particularly if you're in Sydney and Melbourne, and that's going to happen everywhere else in the world, right? As real estate gets more expensive, rack space is more expensive, the competition for rack space is more. So, yeah, really, you need to try and cut that.
Yeah, and there's a power efficiency as well and all that sort of thing. And so it kind of does makes a lot of sense to me to have to at least start using flash in different places. And now we have the very, very large flash drives too, so it's
that's right. That's exactly right. So yeah, where you've got large flash drives, you've got a lot of capacity in that one device. So really, you start to see in terms of SAS performance, it's kind of on par.
Yeah. Sorry, we're going off topic a little bit, but okay. So we now have FabricPool with Snapshots.
Yep.
FabricPool with your secondary, so your SnapMirror, SnapVault destination backup volume. Mm-hmm. What else? What's the last one? Is Auto, of course.
Auto. So, yeah, this is the one everyone was asking about. So, yeah, can we just do the active file system, our cold blocks on our storage? So, yes, as of 9.4, we can. You can see there are a 31-day default cooling period. So, what does that mean? So, it means the moment you turn Auto onto you connect an aggregate to a FabricPool, to an object store. So, you create a FabricPool. Your volumes aren't automatically sent off to the object store tier, right? There's a cooling off period for that to happen. By default, that's 31 days, and that's tunable, anywhere between 2 and 63 days. So why do we do that? Because look, there's a cost to moving data back and forward between your object store and your on-prem, and that's where NetApp has tuned these appropriately. Of course, if you've got a public cloud object store versus your own private object store with something like Storage Grid Web Scale, you might want to tune these. It might not matter to you as much having that data move back and forward between the object store more often if it's your own object store.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you don't want things moving back and forth too often, but you also don't want to wait too long to move what is a cold block.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a balance. And that's where NetApp has tuned this to come up with, based on the testing we've seen, based on our own trials over the last year or so before 9.4 released, is where we've come up with the models we have around that, around 31 days.
Cool. I did see a question come through actually about the sizing, and I wanted to touch on that as well. So you obviously have a flash aggregate as your metadata store, and there is a maximum amount of, based on that metadata store, how much you can tier off to an object store, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's a hard limit of 20 times what you're storing in terms of metadata.
That's right, and you sort of do a sizing around the metadata, right? An example would be, you calculate approximately 10% of the data as metadata, and that's an assumption you can make. There are also some sizing tools, like for NetApp partners and for customers who can work with NetApp and our partners. There are some sizing tools around helping you model this for your particular data sets to be able to size it correctly for the amount of flash you keep on-prem versus how much you need in the cloud.
And there's one other question, because I know I hear it a lot as well, is can I use FabricPool as a replacement for backup?
So yeah, FabricPool isn't a replacement for backup. So again, if you lost your on-premises AFF or FAS storage system, that's housing the metadata for that data that's moved off to the cloud or to the object store, right? So if you lost your FAS, you can't get the data back from that bucket on the object store. So no, it's not a replacement for the backup. So you still use the same technologies as you would traditionally in NetApp, so things like SnapVault to move those off to other technologies, and again, you can use FabricPool with SnapVault as we spoke about with the backup policy. Yeah,
and in that case, you'd probably have your SnapVault at another, on another array as well. So you're basically you are protected in that event that you lost one of those arrays.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. I did see. I'm just going to answer a couple of questions here. So firstly, how does it integrate with something like, say, Commvault or an actual backup product that is driving Snapshots?
Yeah, I think it's kind of invisible to Commvault in a way, right? So Commvault can create snapshots. If you had a snapshot policy set on FabricPool, FabricPool can move those snapshots off onto the cloud or an object store, right? If Commvault had to use to retrieve those, it could still retrieve them the same way it would normally. ONTAP will still serve those blocks back to Commvault. It may well do it invisibly to Commvault from the object store. So yes, integrates very well with Commvault and with all of the other backup applications that might create snapshots on ONTAP.
Yeah, and there's one thing I always find myself having to remind myself that we're moving things at a block level. So when we're doing a FabricPool, or when FabricPool is doing its magic, it's really looking at what blocks are called, not necessarily files or whole volumes. It's really granular to the ONTAP, to the file system underneath, and therefore, it's so much smarter than maybe a way of going, having to manually move an entire volume or pick the files that you're going to move. It's at a block level. That's
right. I mean, I guess the way to think of it, and it kind of back to the backup question as well, a phrase kind of used to explain FabricPool is composite aggregates, right? If you think of composite aggregates, it means just as we had with FlashPool, where your aggregate consisted of cache, which was your SSD drives and hard drives, that was a FlashPool. With FabricPool, your aggregate consists of flash on premises and object, but that's really one aggregate.
Yes, that's awesome. I'm going to just quickly check any questions. If you do have any questions, please drop them into chat. I have also been informed at some point that there are gift cards for good questions, and I'm supposed to tell everybody that you get free stuff if you ask good questions. I get to give them away. I don't have to pay for them, so so please throw your questions into the chat. Okay, so do you know if FabricPool will ever support tiering to FAS or E-Series as a destination? Good question.
Yeah, so I think well, it can certainly support tiering off to E-Series if you had Storage Grid Web Scale as the front end to that, right? You still need an object store front end for it to connect to. As of today, it doesn't do from flash to hard drives internally to a system, but really we see the future moving to all flash. We're talking about 30 terabyte SSD drives that we have today, right? So we're really seeing everything move to all flash on there, and then a separation of that object helps us go deep, right?
Yeah, that scale, really the scale of object.
Absolutely.
Is FabricPool per volume or per aggregate? So we'll go through that in the demo. You'll actually get to see Dave set this up.
Yes, yep. I'll come back to that.
Yeah, and can FabricPool work with flex groups or only flex vols? I believe it's flex vols only at this point.
It's flex vols today. Flex groups are not as yet supported, not on the supported list, but again, watch this space. We're continuing to develop. 9.4 has a lot new features, and as we move on in time, we'll see that added too, but not flex groups today.
Yeah, and I'm really excited. I mean, if you guys haven't seen our updated release cadence, 9.4 has just been released. 9.5 is just around the corner, and I'm really excited at how quickly we're adding features and functionality to ONTAP and all our products, really.
Yeah. So really watch this space on that, right? If you have any features that you think that your customers or you as a customer have a use case for, let your partners know, let your NetApp teams know. Our product managers are really listening to us on what our customers want to do and where they want to take FabricPool in their environment. So yeah, please let us know. That it helps really drive out the roadmaps for us.
Okay, cool. I think we're gonna jump into the demo. I did see a bunch of other questions come through, and we will get through them, and I think we'll be able to show you some of these answers. So,
all right.
Do you want to just go? I think one more slide. So we're going to do 2 demos. Hopefully we can get through them in this short time. Firstly is just setting it up, which is literally 3 steps, and then a big celebration at the end. And then there's a couple of other things that we're going to show. So firstly, setting up FabricPool. Dave?
Yep. Let's do the fun stuff here.
Show us the cool stuff.
All right. So I'm going to start this from System Manager. So here we have NetApp System Manager. This is a 9.4 version of it. And if we have a look here under storage, just waiting for that to fill out. Here we go. Oop, not freeze. That just makes it a bit funny. Sorry, folks. Live demos and all that.
We forgot to pray before this on the live demo, gosh, and they have not been nice to me this week. My laptop has, I actually don't have a laptop at the moment because my hard drive has died.
We're back.
So, and that is because I did not pray for the live demo.
For the live demo. All right. So, on Command System Manager, we have this is just the default view when you log into your cluster. What you see now
that's
under
the 9.4 view, by the way.
9.4 view. That's right.
Really nice stuff.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
If we just have a look at aggregates configured today, right, we can see here there's a FabricPool column now. Yep, where you can see none of those aggregates are currently FabricPool. So I've got a couple of root aggregates and I've got a couple of data aggregates there, which are SSD. So if we go over to external capacity tiers.
And that's what we're calling them, right? External capacity tiers.
That's right. That's right. Yep. We can now add an Amazon S3 object store. So I'm just going to enter my keys in here. So I've got my credentials. I've pre-created a container.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Definitely, no matter what object store you're using, the bucket creation, the container creation is something you have to do. So there's a number of setup steps, but they're quite basic, quite simple, really.
Yeah, exactly. So it's already detected that I have intercluster IP addresses, intercluster lifts already configured. If I hadn't, it lets me do it from this page as well, but they're already there. So I'm going to now save and attach aggregates.
So, there we go. Yep. So while you set that up, I just want to have one of the questions as well is that the object traffic goes out via intercluster lifts.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can obviously have you can create different intercluster. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So you can create different intercluster lifts if you want to separate your traffic for this versus SnapMirror or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All right. So it's picked up my aggregates. And just a comment here is you can do I created a bucket and I've got my 2 aggregates, right? So in terms of the relationship with aggregates to buckets, right? You can have a 1-to-1, so you could have 1 aggregate to a single bucket, or you could have a many-to-1. You could have a number of aggregates to a single bucket, but you cannot have the inverse. You cannot have 1 to many different buckets. Right?
Well, that kind of makes sense, right? Yeah. If you spread your blocks across a number of buckets, it would be very very confusing management.
Exactly.
And so I guess from a where you'd probably see a many-to-1 or a 1-to-1 is really just a preference, or? Yeah,
look, I think for ease of management, it'd be nice to keep it as a best practice at 1-to-1. In this demo, I'm just going to go many-to-1 for the sake of the demo.
Yeah.
Nothing stops us doing that. But yeah, just if you're talking large aggregates, it's easier if you have separate buckets around that. Just in terms of ongoing management. All right, so there's an option here to view and update the tiering policy, and it's detected I have a volume in here. It's picked up the current tiering policy, which is auto. I can select that volume, and I can actually change the tiering policy live right within the GUI to say I want that particular volume to be snapshot only or none. So now we can go back to the question that was asked, is this per aggregate or is it per volume, right? So the answer around that is the FabricPool is per aggregate, it's on an aggregate basis, but I have individual granular control of my volumes around whether I want them to FabricPool off, whether I don't, or whether I want them to use a different policy. So it's really quite flexible.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's as easy, it's all through the GUI as well to set up all of this stuff, so it's quite straightforward. Or there are command line options to, for creating the external capacity tier, for changing the policy on the volumes. It's all there. It's quite exciting, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
So you've just connected an S3-like backend to two of your aggregates.
Yep, exactly. And you can see their use capacity at the moment is 0. So that capacity, we'll see that increase over time once things are tiered off.
Yeah, so as you add data to it. And there is a limit as well. There is a minimum requirement on the aggregates that capacity for active file systems to be tiered off.
Yeah, so you might create this environment just as I've done and tier them off to your object store, but then say, well, hey, why isn't my data tiering off? Why isn't that happening? And so there's a couple of reasons why that won't happen straight away. One is there's a cooling off period, right? Again, we've talked about the 31-day cooling off period, which you can modify between 2 and 63 days. But also, this won't come into play until the aggregate is 50% consumed or greater, right? And that makes sense when you think about it, right? Why tier off? Exactly. Why tier off to the object store when I still have the capacity on my SSDs, right? It makes sense once you start to you need that space on your SSDs over time, and that's where it'll start to tier them off.
Yeah. However, what you are going to show us now is what's next.
What's next? All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we'll have a look at, so we connected to an object store, but we'll show one of the new features within ONTAP 9.4, and that is the profiler. Now, the first thing I need to do before I get into the profiler is I actually have to set advanced privilege mode. So if you set advanced on your console, you can see I've got a little star within my command line there. That'll give me the profiler option.
Oh, sorry, what's the profiler for? Just a quick.
So yeah, the profiler will go and talk to our object store and run a number of puts and gets against it with different block sizes and tell us what the performance is.
Yeah.
So we'll keep that off now. Oh, it's going to make me give it the object store name. That makes sense. The node.
So I did see a question come through on what kind of data set was tested on the tiering, and I think that's one of the things is that we do look at the performance of the object store and see what makes sense on that object store as to whether it's a suitable target for FabricPool.
Absolutely. I'll keep this off because it'll take a little bit of time and then I'll come to that, right? So here's just a notification to say that it's recommended to run this when your system is not under heavy load. I guess the reason for that is it's going to create a workload off to your object store. It says 2,500 input requests. And there's also going to be a flow-on cost to that testing, right? Because you're doing puts and gets from you.
Yeah.
But here we go, that started. So I'm going to do a show here. Okay, profile is shown. All right, and we can see that kicked off. If I just refresh that, you can see that total is increasing, and it's calculating for us the maximum and average latency to that bucket for those particular puts on that first line. So it'll go through and continue that, do the puts, then do the gets, and it'll be giving us those latency stats, right? So your question earlier was around. Refresh me on that question again.
Oh, we were just talking about what kind of workloads, what kind of data sets. Yeah, would make sense.
Great. Thank you. So when NetApp first released this, we sort of said, okay, what do customers want that performance of that object store to look like, right? And so initially NetApp said, well, probably SATA-like performance makes sense, right? So 300 megabytes per second, 30 milliseconds latency, that type of thing. So what we got from customers is often they didn't need that much performance, right? They could do what they wanted to do with less performance from that object store tier. And so that really is, as you said, workload dependent, right? So if you look at an SMB workload or an NFS workload where the file system can handle that particular latency, right? If there's going to be no impact to that particular application as long as it's able to handle that. If you look at SMB, for example, it can handle a 5-second delay in that data coming back on the latest versions of SMB, right? So it can handle that. From a block LUN type perspective, it's really going to depend on your application and on your host on how it can handle the delay of data pulling back from an object store. So that's why you're running this. You do need to check it against your application. because again, an application has to be able to handle the amount of time it might take to pull it back.
Yeah, and this is a great way as well of testing it, testing that kind of thing, is running it up in a test environment, maybe with an ONTAP Cloud, which supports this, or ONTAP Select, which also supports this, just to give it a go, see what it looks like with your workload, yeah.
That's right, and if you do need that performance, right, this is where you can talk about, okay, this is where Direct Connect, AWS Direct Connect or Azure Express Route comes in, where NetApp will say, if you need that performance, our best practice is for you to have really a 10 gig interface between your on-prem and your object store.
Yeah, and definitely with a storage grid where you're running that inside your data center, you're not even needing to go out to an external link, so you may have that network available. Yeah, so that should be fine. Yeah,
absolutely.
Cool. Aside from the performance profile, which I think is really cool, there was another feature that was added in 9.4, which allows us to see how much, what kind of data would actually move off the performance tier, right? So which I've
inactive data.
Forgotten the name of.
Inactive data.
Inactive data.
So inactive data lets you check basically NetApp FAS has a heat map, ONTAP has a heat map of your data, right? So it's the best thing to be able to tell you how hot or cold those particular blocks are. So the inactive data feature it's run by default the moment you turn on FabricPool for the FabricPool aggregates. But the beauty of it is you can actually turn it on the non-FabricPool aggregates. So you can run that inactive data analysis against an aggregate that is not yet FabricPool and determine whether this makes sense to do once you've got 9.4 on.
That's awesome. That is really exciting. I think that's visible in System Manager, so it will tell you, you have this much data that it could potentially be tiered to an external capacity tier, and then you can then choose. You run the profiler against your storage grid or against AWS or against Azure Blob, and then you can turn it on. So that's really exciting.
Yes.
While that's going on, I'm just going to throw some more questions at you so that we can get through them, and also I can wrap up the session. What happens if the IP connectivity between the ONTAP array and the capacity tier is interrupted?
That's a really good question. So if that happens, actually we cover this really well in our technical report. So I think we should have that in the resources at the end of the.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, there are links for everybody who's on this call. There are a number of links that we'll send out as well with oodles of FabricPool information.
So to answer the question, if you have a network an outage between your object store and your all-flash FAS, your client will get an error saying that it cannot get to the data if it needs to retrieve that data from the object store, right? That technical report I spoke about actually shows you what what those errors would look like, and you can then work out how to deal with those with your particular application. But again, it comes back to that's why if you are using this as a best practice from NetApp, if you're using this and you want full performance and full availability, that's why Direct Connect and Express Route really make sense. Cool.
If you change the tiering policy as well on the fly, how does it actually get picked up by that volume? So is it via schedule or is it immediately? I think that period, that 2 to 63 days is kind of the
it's going to come back.
That's going to play in that space, right?
Yeah, that's right. And again, there's some policies you can't set. So the backup policy is only something you would normally apply on the destination.
Snapmare destination.
Snapmare destination as well. Yeah. If you had a volume where you had it set to none and then you turned it on to active, it's now going to be the counter will start around that the cooling off period.
And actually, that's something I really like about the backup policy in particular, is that if I have an existing environment where I do have all these backups and I do want to get them onto an external capacity tier as soon as possible, I can do that through a vol move at the moment.
Absolutely, and in fact, that's the next thing I'll show you in the demo. Is we can force a volume to go and tier off to our external tier. So via a vol move.
Do you want to show it now?
Yeah, let's do that. So if I do a vol show here, we can see my volumes currently on the system. So I've got a CIFS volume I'm going to use. I'm attached to that CIFS volume at the moment here. Here it is. Yep, and I've got a text file here. And I'll just add another bar to that for proof that I'm It's just like my other documentation, really.
That's all we write, blah, blah.
All right, so if I do a vol move of this particular volume, vol move start, my volume is going to be my share 6 volume, my destination aggregate, and I want to set, as you can see, I now have an option of tiering policy down the bottom here. And to kind of force that volume, let's say that volume is one that I know for certain that is a cold volume, right?
Yep.
That is something I know that it's no touch. I want to really force that archive off to my external tier, right? Yep. So I can force that by pushing, even though I'm on my primary storage. This is not a DP volume, right? It's a primary read-write volume. I'm going to force it to tiering policy back up, which will come and it's just talking to me about efficiencies there because I'm going to lose those, and the job is now queued, right? So it's now going to vol move that with the backup policy up to the object store.
And then after that, from that point on,
yep.
that volume, which is sitting on object,
yep.
how will that behave?
It'll flip that, once that's moved over, it'll flip that policy back to auto again.
Okay.
Yeah, so then it's just part of, like any other volume on your system, set to auto.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
So now all those blocks, cold blocks in that share SIFT volume will be on object.
Yes.
But if we needed to access that file from somebody said, oh, I've got that one file that had all those blahs in it that I want to pull back, and I just open that volume, that sits there back up again.
Yes.
And it will just pull that back from.
And I'll show that once it's up there. Right. So.
How do I see when it's there? How do I know how much data has been moved?
Good question. Okay, so what I can do is show space of my object store. Okay, so that vol move is still taking place. Vol move show. It's finished now. Okay, so let's go and have a look over at our okay. So we can see where that bucket was previously empty, right? And now it's got 1.37 gig in there.
Nice.
So if we have a look inside, look in here. There we go. Oops, sorry, it's downloaded those objects, didn't mean to do that. You can see now those objects, so ONTAP has packaged up my volume, right, and sent it up to my object store. This is just obviously just a test object store in the lab environment, but yeah, you would see it the same if you looked in your bucket in S3, in AWS or in Azure, and you can see where it's packaged those blocks up into 4 megabyte chunks.
So what it's done is taken all those blocks that were in that in your SIFT file share, packaged them up into 4 meg objects.
Yes.
And that's why they've got those funny, very long names.
Yes.
And then those are sent. Okay, so what happens if I pull back individual blocks or, maybe a component of those objects back to my active file system? Yeah,
that's a great question. So it will pull back just, subsets of those blocks. One thing to note, and we haven't really spoken about this yet, but what happens, you might ask the question, what happens if I delete some of those blocks or some of those files? I delete my blah, and that's no longer once what it was, right? And those blocks are now freed up. ONTAP in 9.4 has the ability for you to tune how much of that, we'll call it defragmenting, that you do between your object blocks and your FAS, right? So, because essentially you could say inside one of those 4 meg objects, there'll be holes there in time, right, if I'm making a lot of changes to that. So it's quite tunable for you to determine at what percentage of change do I pull back those objects and rewrite them out, concatenate them again, and rewrite them out as new objects.
And that makes a lot of sense. If you've got a storage grid where you've already got that environment that's been provisioned, you might want to free it up as soon as possible so that you can use it for other object workloads. Whereas if it's S3, where it's you don't really mind how much you're using, then you could tune that to wait a bit longer before it does that defrag process.
That's right, and NetApp has some best practices that we set out of the box depending on your your object store of choice, right? So for Amazon, for example, we do a 20% rate of change, Azure is 15, but if you have your own storage group web scale on-prem, it's set to 40 in terms of how much change happens before we come back. And right. So you can tune that individually between them, but NetApp has picked best practices based on what we see around the cost-benefit analysis of doing that on your particular object store.
Yeah, we like to say, or at least I definitely like to say that the default should be best practice, and that's something that I definitely see us moving towards, where having you've got a default that's going to suit many workloads, the majority of workloads.
Yeah, that's it.
But it's always tunable, which is nice. Okay, so I've got, we have 3 minutes left, so I wanted to just go through a couple of the questions.
Yeah, sure. I'll just show for 1 second that we can see I just did that update on show space of my object store, so I ran that from the CLI, and I can now see that use space is showing as consumed.
So you can actually see how much of the object store has been is used for FabricPool.
Exactly right. Yep. And even from I'll go back to System Manager, and that's refreshed every 5 minutes, and I'll click on external capacity tiers. And voila, we can see that that's now updated, and I can see my capacity.
It's definitely very visible, very reportable. Monitoring and that sort of thing is all there.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So quickly, what happens if you remove FabricPool from an aggregate? So yeah, I guess how would you turn off FabricPool? Yeah.
So I guess a little bit like FlashPool in a way. Again, we think of these as composite aggregates, right? Once your FabricPool is attached to your aggregate, I'll just flip back to the slide. Sorry, where are they? There we go. Slides from there. And I'll just set that to there. There we go. Sorry, trying to do two things at once here.
Sorry.
So that was active data reporting. Okay, so yeah, to answer that question, it's composite aggregate, a bit like FlashPool is when you have SSD and hard drives joined up. You can't easily decouple them. FabricPool's the same way, right? If you wanted to decouple an object store from an aggregate, you can do that by vol moving off to another aggregate, and then you can destroy that FabricPool.
Yes, that would be non-disruptive vol move.
Non-disruptive vol move, right? So non-disruptive activity, but yeah, you have to do that, move the data to.
Thank you so much, Dave. We've got the slide up there with a number of resources. These will get sent out as well because there's a lot of them. We do also have blogs and TRs on different workloads, so databases using FabricPool. I think there might be one on backup as well.
Yep.
I did see a couple of other questions, and I apologize if I didn't get around to yours, but we will make sure that we reach out to you. What else did I want to cover today? Yes, licensing. Sorry, there was a question around this. So basically, what I really like about FabricPool is that it's available in all of our systems, right, Dave? So anything that's running on ONTAP, you can run FabricPool with a couple of different versions of it. So
yeah, that's right. So ONTAP Select, ONTAP Cloud, Tabare AFF.
So if you are, yes, that's right. And if you have a brand new FAS, I believe you get a license included with that to give it a go.
That's right. Yep. For a terabyte.
Yeah. So there are lots of ways of trying this. If you are interested, do reach out to your SC or to myself or to somebody at NetApp, and we're happy to point you in the right direction. There is a YouTube playlist as well, which has some really great videos of how to set it up and what to do next. And I think there's one more slide before I let you all go. Events. I don't actually know what's going on. It's June. I know I do. So we have the next Geek Out in July, which I believe is on OCI and our brand new, never been seen before private preview, Cloud Insights. We do appreciate if you sign up for that and send through some feedback. I will make sure to address that next time. And yes, the event that I wanted to talk about, NetApp Insights. If you are interested in this, please come along. And Insight is my favorite NetApp event of the year because it's a place to get together with your peers and colleagues and find out all the really cool stuff they're doing, and have a chat to people who are using FabricPool, go and ask the CMEs and product team about FabricPool and its future. And yeah, it's a fantastic event. So the tickets I know are being organised in the moment. So if Dave's had customers go before, partners go before, it's a great event. So that's, I've gone a bit over time, so I do apologise. This webinar will be sent out, recorded and sent out. The slides will be sent out, and we will get to your questions. If there's anything else, drop us a line, and we hope to see you next month at Geek Out. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Welcome. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.